Hello all, and thank you for joining me for Applying for Financial Aid 2021-2022 FAFSA walkthrough. The goal of our Applying for Financial Aid video series is to take some of the mystery out of the financial aid process. Check our website at jjc.edu/financial aid for a link to our other financial aid help videos. During this walkthrough, we will go through the steps for a dependent student. However, the process is very similar for an independent student. The major difference between the two is that a student who is considered independent will not be required to complete the parent portions of the FAFSA application. My name is Deanna and I'm the Director of Financial Aid at Joliet Junior College. The intended audience for this video is any student and/or parent who is looking for information on completing the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. If you've never completed a FAFSA before, these screenshots will give you a thorough understanding of what to expect on the application. This is a lengthy presentation since we are going through each screen of the FAFSA. If you are stuck on a particular section of your FAFSA, I suggest skipping ahead on the video. I've put headings on each slide to correspond with where we are on the FAFSA process. So for example, if you are stuck on the parent demographics section of the FAFSA, skip ahead in this video to look for parent demographics in the top title portion of the slide. Before we dive in, just a few general tips. 1, the navigation tabs at the top of the page tell you which step of the process you are on and whose information they are requesting, student versus parent. 2, the FAFSA does save itself often as noted in the green box. 3, the FAFSA also reminds you that this is the student's application for financial aid. So anytime that you see requests for information noted by you, your, or such as your name, this is asking for the student's information. 4, the help buttons at the end of each field are extremely helpful if you get stuck on a question. And 5, the FAFSA uses skip logic, which means that depending on how you answer a question, it may trigger another question to appear or hide. So you may not be asked all of the questions that appear in this walkthrough, and your FAFSA experience may not be the same as another student's. Let's get started at fafsa.ed.gov. On the FAFSA homepage, you will see the option to log in as a new user or as a returning user. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be logging in as a new user. The next screen asks, who is the person logging in, the student or a preparer, which is more rare. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be choosing, I am the student. The student will then enter their FSA ID and username and password. If you have not yet created your FSA ID, you can do so at fsaid.ed.gov or by clicking the link on this page. View our jjc.edu/financial aid webpage for help videos on how to create your FSA ID or if you've forgotten your FSA ID username or password. You will be presented with a disclaimer. Please read it and then click Accept to move forward. On the Get Started page, you will be asked to select which FAFSA year that you are applying for. If you are planning to attend college August 2021 through May 2022, select the 2021-2022 FAFSA, and you will use 2019 income and tax info to complete this FAFSA. If you are planning to attend college August 2020 to May 2021, select the 2020-2021 FAFSA, and you will use 2018 income and tax info to complete this FAFSA. If you will be attending in both years, be sure to complete both FAFSAs. And if you are attending in the summer semesters, May through August, contact your college to determine which FAFSA to complete. For the purposes of this walkthrough, We will be selecting the 2021-2022 FAFSA. The student will be prompted to enter a save key. The save key allows an applicant to save their FAFSA form and return at a later time to complete and submit it. The application is saved for 45 days unless the applicant submits their application for processing prior to that. The save key also provides applicants a way to share access to their FAFSA form or correction if their parents need to add information or sign it. You will then be brought to an introduction screen with some frequently asked questions. Each topic has accordion functionality that can be expanded and contracted to reveal or conceal additional information. The first student demographics screen asks for the student's social security number, name, and date of birth. This next screen asks for the student's email address and telephone number. While not mandatory, it is beneficial for the applicant to include an email address on the FAFSA in order to receive important communications about their financial aid. The third student demographics screen asks for the student's permanent mailing address. This demographics screen asks for the student's residency and eligibility information. In the U.S. citizen dropdown, if the student selects eligible non-citizen, then they will be prompted to enter an alien registration number. If the student is neither a citizen nor an eligible non-citizen, such as a DACA student or an international student, they are not eligible for federal student aid. In this case, if the student is an Illinois resident, we would suggest that they complete the alternative application for Illinois financial aid available at isac.org. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will select, yes, I am a U.S. citizen. This next screen asks what the student's high school completion status will be when they begin college in the 2021-2022 academic year, such as high school diploma, GED, or homeschooled. Then answer what college degree or certification the student will be working on, such as a bachelor's degree, associate's degree, certificate, etc. Answer yes or no if the student will have their first bachelor's degree when they are beginning school in the 2021-2022 academic year. And then indicate what level of college the student will be in during the 2021-2022 academic year, such as first year, second year, graduate student, etc. Note that these are asking about your levels in college, not high school. We often have students answer this incorrectly. Lastly, indicate whether or not the student is interested in work study. Work study is a program where students can get a student worker position at their college. This next demographics screen asks if the student is male or female. And if male, you will be prompted with additional questions about registering with the Selective Service System. Most male citizens and male immigrants between the ages of 18 and 25 must register with the Selective Service System to receive federal student aid. This requirement applies to any person assigned the sex of a male at birth. This next demographic screen asks for the student's driver's license information. The eighth and final student demographic screen asks if the student is a foster youth or was ever in the foster care system. And then finally, answer what the highest level of schooling that each of the student's parents has achieved. If you are unsure, there is an other/unknown option in the drop-down menu. So now you'll notice that we've moved on to the next section, school selection. On the first school selection page, enter the name, city, and state of the high school where the student received or will be receiving their high school diploma and click Search. Note, you will only see this screen if you indicated on the previous demographics screen that your high school completion status is high school diploma. You will not see this screen if you indicated you were homeschooled or received a GED certificate. Once you click Search, the second school selection page will appear, prompting you to select the correct high school. The third school selection page is where you can select up to 10 colleges to send your information to. If the student is unsure what college they will be attending, complete the FAFSA anyway. You can always come back in to your FAFSA and add or change school codes. It's always a good idea to add your local community college to your FAFSA just in case your plans unexpectedly change. If you already know your school's federal school code, select Yes here and enter the code. Joliet Junior College's federal school code is 001699. If you do not know your college's federal school code, use the search function. Enter the state, city, and school name, and then click Search. The search results will appear. Select the correct school by checking the box next to it. If you want to add more schools, click here and you will be redirected back to the search screen so that you can add more schools. Once the student has selected all of the schools that they would like their FAFSA information to be sent to, they will be prompted to select a housing plan for each school. Select if the student will be living on campus, with a parent, or off campus. You can also choose to add more schools from this screen. Notice that we've now moved on to the Dependency Status tab of the application. The FAFSA uses this series of questions to determine if the student is considered dependent or independent for the purposes of the FAFSA. Use the drop-down menu to select what the student's marital status is as of the day you are completing the FAFSA. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are focusing on a dependent student, so we will select that the student is single. The next page will ask you to determine if the student has any children or qualifying other dependents. Note that both questions indicate that the student must provide more than half of the support through the entire academic year to qualify. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are focusing on a dependent student, so we will select that the student does not have any children or qualifying other dependents. This page asks the student to check mark if any of the situations apply, or select none of the above. Don't forget to use the Help button if you ever want to read more about a question. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are focusing on a dependent student, so we will select that none of the above apply to the student. Indicate here if the student is homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. If yes is selected, there will be additional series of questions about the homeless status. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be selecting no. In our scenario, the student is considered a dependent student and will need to enter their parents' demographic and parent financial information next. Had the student been considered independent based on the FAFSA questions, they would have been able to skip the parent sections and move on to the student financials instead. It is important to note that if you are self-sufficient and living on your own, that does not automatically make you independent for the FAFSA. Parental data is required for dependent students. Select here if the student will provide parental data If the student is unable to provide parental data due to special circumstances, such as the parents are deceased, incarcerated, or the student no longer lives with them due to neglect, abandonment, or a documented history of abuse, then select that you are unable to provide information about parents. This will bring up a series of informational screens about what to do if you are submitting your FAFSA without parental data, and you will need to contact your college's financial aid office for next steps. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be selecting I will provide information about my parents. Notice now that we've moved on to the Parent Demographics tab. Use the drop-down menu to select what the parent's marital status is as of the day that you are completing the FAFSA. Depending on what is selected from this drop-down menu, additional questions will appear such as date of marriage or date of divorce and whose information you will be providing on the FAFSA. This is a good screen to use the help features as it is often a point of confusion for students. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we will be selecting that the parents are married or remarried. So this screen is information that can help you determine which parental information that you should be entering on your FAFSA. If your parents are married, you'll be providing information on both parents. If your parent is remarried, then you will be providing information on your parent and step-parent. If your parent is widowed, you will be providing information on your surviving parent. If your legal parents are unmarried and living together, you will be providing information on both parents. If your parents were never married and do not live together, you will provide information on the parent with whom you've lived the most over the past 12 months. And if your parents are divorced or separated, you will provide information on the parent with whom you lived with the most over the past 12 months. You'll notice the star on these two last ones. If you lived with both your parents equally over the past 12 months, provide information on the parent who provided more financial support during that time or during the most recent year that you actually received support from a parent. So back into the parent demographics screen now, you will be prompted to enter the first parent's social security number, name, date of birth, and email address. It is important to note that immigration status of a dependent's parents does not affect the student's financial aid eligibility. So if your parent does not have a valid social security number, you will want to enter 000000000 on this page. Do not enter their IRS ITIN number. Now you will be prompted to enter the second parent's social security number, name, and date of birth. Remember, depending on the answer to the marital status question of your parents, you may or may not be prompted to enter information for both parents. You will answer this question about your parents' state of legal residence. The next screen asks for information about the household size and the number of people in the household who will be attending college during the same academic year. This is another screen that many students make mistakes on, so be sure to read each section carefully and use the help links and help buttons provided. Some of this information is pre-filled based on responses provided previously on the FAFSA form, and other sections allow you and your parent to edit. Now we have moved on to the parent financials section of the FAFSA. The financial sections are another great place to use those help buttons if you're not sure what they are asking for, or where you should find it on your IRS tax forms and W-2s. The first question asks whether or not your parents have already completed their IRS tax return. The second question asks what type of tax return they filed, and the third asks what their filing status was on the tax return. You will find these answers on their completed tax return. Pay close attention to which tax year's information that they are asking for to be sure that you are looking at the correct tax documents. If your parents are eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you will see the link to IRS button. This is the easiest and most efficient and accurate way to import your parents' tax information into the FAFSA. We highly encourage your parents use the link to IRS tool if they are eligible. The process will take them to the IRS site and request some personal identifiers from them. Be sure to type in the information exactly as it appears on their latest tax return, such as any abbreviations in their mailing address. Once complete, they will be returned to the FAFSA site and all of their tax data will be imported automatically. If your parents are not eligible to use the data retrieval tool, they will see a different message indicating that. There are several reasons that they may be ineligible to use the tool, such as if they were recently married or if they filed their tax returns with the filing status of married filing separately. If they are not eligible to use the data retrieval tool, they will need to enter their tax and income information manually on the next couple of screens. This view is displayed when the parent chooses not to use the IRS data retrieval tool on the previous page. An additional opportunity is presented to the parent to determine if they would like to link to the IRS or continue to enter their information manually. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are not using the data retrieval tool and will discuss manual entry of each item. This screen asks for how much each of your parents earned from working. Don't forget to look at the correct year that they are asking about, and the instructions here tell you exactly which lines to add up from their tax return. Your parent may or may not have some of these forms in their tax return. For example, not everyone is required to file a Schedule 1 or a Schedule K1, so they may not have an amount to add in for that portion. If your parent did not earn anything from working in that year, enter 0. If your parents were able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see the words transferred from the IRS in these fields and will not need to provide any additional information. Remember that the FAFSA uses skip logic. So if your parents indicated that they did not file taxes, they may not see some of these financial questions. The questions or instructional text that you see on this screen may vary, as it is based upon responses to previous questions. Your parent may or may not see the first question about filing a Schedule 1 with their tax return. Your parent will be asked if they are a dislocated worker and if they've received any assistance from the listed federal benefit programs. Use the hyperlinks and the help buttons for definitions and additional information. This screen asks how much your parents' income tax is. Don't forget to look at the correct tax year that they are asking about, and the instructions here tell exactly which lines to look at on their tax return. Your parent may or may not have some of these tax forms in their tax return. For example, not everyone is required to file a Schedule 2, so they may not have an amount for this portion. If your parents were able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see transferred from the IRS text in these fields and will not need to provide any additional information. This screen asks for more information about your parents' income and tax information. Again, pay attention to what tax year they are asking about. Refer to the instructions on each line for where to find this information on your tax returns. If they do not have an amount for that item, leave it as zero. If your parents were able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see transferred from the IRS text in some of these fields and will not need to provide additional information. This screen asks for more information about your parents' income and tax information. Again, pay attention to the year they are asking for and refer to the help buttons on each field if needed. If your parents do not have an amount for an item, leave it as zero. On this screen, the FAFSA is asking for information about your parents' untaxed income. As always, pay attention to the year that the FAFSA is asking for. Read each question carefully and use the help buttons on each field if needed. If your parents do not have an amount for an item, leave it as zero. The last screen of the parent financials section asks for information about your parents' assets, such as cash, saving and checking account balances, net worth of investments, and net worth of their businesses or farms. Note that these questions want you to answer as of today, the day you are filling out the FAFSA, which is different than the previous financial screens, which all requested tax and income data from 2 years prior. Depending on the responses to previous questions, your parent may be required to complete this section, or they may be presented with the choice to complete it. So now that you've completed the parent financial section, you will be asked to provide the same type of information for the student. The first question asks whether or not the student has already completed their IRS tax return. Then it asks what type of tax return the student has filed and what the student's filing status was on the tax return. You will find these answers on the student's completed tax return and pay close attention to the year that they are asking about. If the student worked and is eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you will see the link to IRS button. This is the easiest and most efficient and accurate way to import the student's tax information into the FAFSA. We highly encourage the student to use the link to IRS tool if they are eligible. This process will take them to the IRS site and request some personal identifiers. Be sure to type in the information exactly as it appears on the student's latest tax return, such as any abbreviations in their mailing address. Once complete, they will be returned to the FAFSA site and all of their tax data will be imported automatically. If the student is not eligible to use the data retrieval tool, they will see a message indicating that. And if they are not eligible to use the DRT, they will need to enter their tax and income information manually on the next couple of screens. This view is displayed when the student chooses not to use the IRS data retrieval tool on the previous screen. An additional opportunity is presented to the student to determine if they would like to link to the IRS or they would like to continue to enter their financial information manually. For the purposes of this walkthrough, we are not using the data retrieval tool and will discuss manual entry of each item. So this screen of the student financials asks for the student's adjusted gross income. Don't forget to look at the correct year that they're asking about, and the instructions here tell you exactly which line to look at on the student's tax return. If the student was able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see the words transferred from the IRS in these fields and will not need to provide any additional information. This next screen asks for how much the student earned from working. Again, don't forget to look at the correct year that they are asking about. And the instructions here tell you exactly which lines to add up from the student's tax return. The student may or may not have some of these forms in their tax return. For example, not everyone is required to file a Schedule 1 or a Schedule K1, so they may not have any amounts to add for those portions. If the student did not earn anything from working in that year, enter 0. If the student was able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see transferred from the IRS text in these fields and will not need to provide any additional information. Remember that the FAFSA uses skip logic, so if the student indicated that they did not file taxes, they may not see some of these financial questions. This screen asks for how much the student's income tax is. Don't forget to look at the correct year, and the instructions tell you exactly which line to look at on the tax return. The student may or may not have some of these forms in their tax return. For example, not everyone is required to file a Schedule 2, so they may not have an amount for this portion. If the student was able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see transferred from the IRS text in these fields and will not need to provide any additional information. This screen asks for more information about the student's income and tax information. Again, pay attention to the year that they are asking about and refer to the instructions on each line where to find this information on the tax forms. If the student does not have an amount for an item, leave it as 0. If the student was able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they will see transferred from the IRS text in some of these fields and would not need to provide any additional information. This screen asks for more information about the student's income and tax information. Again, pay attention to the year that they are asking about and refer to the help buttons on each field if needed. If the student does not have an item amount for an item, leave it as 0. This screen asks for information about the student's untaxed income. As always, pay attention to the year that they are asking about, read each question carefully, and refer to the help button on each field if needed. If the student does not have an amount for an item, leave it as 0. The last screen of the Student Financials section asks for information about the student's assets, such as cash, saving, and checking account balances, net worth of investments, and net worth of their businesses or farms. Note that the questions want you to report amounts as of today, the day you are filling out the FAFSA, which is different than the previous financial screens, which all requested tax and income data from 2 years prior. Again, this is the student's information. I know those financial sections can be overwhelming. The good news is that once you finally make it through them, you are almost at the end of the application. You'll see now that we've moved to the Sign and Submit tab of the process. On the first screen of Sign and Submit steps, you are asked if the person completing the FAFSA is a preparer. A preparer is anyone who charges a fee to help you complete the FAFSA. The FAFSA alerts you that this is rare. You can also click the hyperlink or the help button for more information. You will then be presented with a summary of all of the FAFSA data that you entered. These two screenshots just show a portion of the information. You'll want to scroll through the summary and review everything for accuracy. If you find something that needs to be corrected, click the hyperlink next to the item to return to that section of the FAFSA and make your correction. This is your opportunity to make sure everything is correct and avoid any processing delays down the line. Once you get to the bottom of the summary page, you'll see a button to print this page if you choose to do so. The next screen starts the signature process. Because this is a dependent student's FAFSA, a signature from both the student and the parent is required. You'll see the status of each signature is unsigned. FAFSA gives some tips in the box at the top. This is the process where the student and the parent can each use their unique FSA ID username and password to electronically sign the FAFSA. Click Provide Student Signature to get started. The student's terms and conditions will appear. Read and understand what you are signing, as this is a federal application. Agree to the certification statement to move forward. The student can now click Sign this FAFSA to electronically sign the FAFSA. You will be brought back to the signature status screen, where you can now see the student's status has been updated to signed electronically. The parent will now need to sign. This screen allows you to choose which parent will be signing the application. Only one parent signature is required. If you can't remember who you listed as parent 1 or parent 2, refer to the Social Security number and birth date to help. This view will not display if you've only entered parent demographic information for one parent earlier in the application. The parent's terms and conditions will appear. Read and understand what you are signing, as this is a federal application. The parent must agree to the certification statement to move forward. This screen will allow the parent to enter their FSA ID username and password to electronically sign. Click Sign the FAFSA. If the parent was able to use the IRS data retrieval tool earlier in the application, they will not be required to re-enter their FSA ID username and password. Signing electronically is the fastest and easiest method. However, if the parent is unable to create their own FSA ID username and password to electronically sign the FAFSA, you'll want to click on Other Options to sign and submit. If the parent clicks on Other Options to sign and submit, they will be presented with these three options. If your parent is unable to sign electronically, select the Print a Signature Page option. You will need to print the signature page, have your parent sign it, and then mail it to the Department of Education. Do this as soon as possible, as there are delays with the manual signature process. Your FAFSA is not valid without signatures, so we do not recommend that you choose to submit without signatures. For the purposes of this walkthrough, the parent signed the FAFSA electronically, and you can now see the status of both signatures is complete. The final step is to click the Submit My FAFSA Now button. Do not forget to submit the FAFSA, even if your parent did not sign electronically and you are mailing in a signature page. The final page is a confirmation page. Congratulations, your FAFSA has been submitted. This screen gives you some general ideas of what happens next. It is important to know that your school will not receive this information for a few business days, and even when they do, you may be required to submit additional documentation to the school before your financial aid can be awarded. So it's always important to apply early. Be sure to watch for communication from your schools on required documentation they may need. This screen also gives you the student's expected family contribution. This is the amount that the Department of Education has calculated that your family is expected to contribute to the student's education for this year. This is the number that colleges must use to determine what other financial awards a student may be eligible for. So just a few helpful tips now that you've submitted your FAFSA. In a couple of business days, your FAFSA information will be available to the schools that you listed on your FAFSA. If you haven't already, make sure to complete an admissions application for each of those schools. Usually their applications are found on their school's websites. Watch for financial aid communication from each school, such as deadline dates, payment due dates, and requests for additional information. These communications are typically sent to your student email account or school portal, not so much your personal email account. You may be selected for a process called verification, and this means that the school will be required to request additional forms from you before your financial aid is complete. After all of your documents have been submitted and reviewed by the school, each school will present you with a financial aid offer letter or award letter. When in doubt, contact your school's financial aid office. And don't forget, you have to redo the FAFSA every year on October 1st. Are you planning to attend Joliet Junior College? Watch our additional videos to know what to expect as a student at JJC with your financial aid. Our website, jjc.edu/financial aid, has additional help videos for you to watch. Do you need assistance completing your FAFSA? If after this walkthrough you still need some help, here are some good resources to check out. Studentaidhelp.ed.gov has information on their website, and they also provide assistance via chat and email. You can also call them at 1-800-4FED-AID. Studentaid.gov also has a great resource about steps to complete the FAFSA. As I've mentioned a few times, you can find more financial aid help videos on our website at jjc.edu/financial aid. And you can always call or email us for assistance, and virtual appointments are also available. So that's the end of the presentation for today. Here's our contact information. I want to thank you all for joining me. I know this was a long one, but hopefully you were able to skip ahead and get some answers to some of your questions. And if you need additional help, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you. Have a good one.